Thank you for coming. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you a person with whom you're probably mostly all familiar, the Dean of Science Fiction Authors, Aficionados, and as I understand, coined the phrase sci-fi. Forrest has been very helpful for us this weekend, is a strong believer in preservation, and with no further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our host for today, Forrest Ackerman.
Well, I'm afraid I wasted the first 5.5 years of my life, but in 1922 I began to go to motion pictures taken by my maternal grandparents. We would start out around the corner at the Paramount Theater, which unfortunately doesn't exist any longer. And after seeing 2 films and a stage show there, we'd have lunch and generally gravitate here to the Los Angeles Theater. I imagine between 1930 and 1940 I saw virtually every film that was shown in this picture house. And as for the bits and pieces we saw on the screen, since I was capable of seeing as many as 7 films in a single day, and one year 356, I probably saw in their entirety everything that was flashed on there in bits and pieces. We're here today to see the culmination of about a half a dozen great futuristic films that have gone before. The first major one was in 1927 when Fritz Lang catapulted us 100 years into the future, into the marvelous world of Metropolis with a population of 60 million people and somehow or other no smog. That was something that was not predicted, but it had that incredible robot tricks in it. And if you remember here on the screen for one little moment, you saw a woman giving a very lascivious wink. That was Brigitte Helm, the robotrix of Metropolis, who is still alive in Switzerland. In 1951, I sat in her home in Munich, and she did the very sly wink for me. I've always wished that I'd had a Polaroid camera. Well, following Metropolis in 1927, there opened over at the California Theater. I guess the California Theater was established about 1910, but it had been renovated and was reopening in 1929. And the first film they chose was the second British talking film following an Alfred Hitchcock movie, and it was a story of the future. It was 1929's vision of 1940 called High Treason, which predicted television telephones in it, and a tunnel under the English Channel between England and France, and a potential war of 1940. The year following, in 1930, Maureen O'Sullivan, who most of us will remember as the original Jane of the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan films, was a girl of the year 1980. This was a 50-year prediction. At the Carthay Circle Theater, which unfortunately no longer exists, they put a time capsule in the forecourt there. It was, in 1930, was to be opened in 1980 to see a print of Just Imagine and see how near we were to the realities. In that prediction, everyone had numeral names. Maureen O'Sullivan was LN18, and her young fiancé was J21. And they took a manned trip already in 1980 to Mars, which was still a little ahead of time in our future. In 1936, H.G. Wells gave us a prediction of the world of 2026 and things to come. It opened at the 4-star theater. I saw it repeatedly, and in the second week I noticed there had been 6 cuts taken out of the picture. In the conclusion of it, human beings were shot off to the moon out of a giant cannon rather than rockets. And then George Orwell gave us 1984, the world of Big Brother. And people were lining up at the opening of Logan's Run, which became very popular in the science fiction circles. For years afterwards at the conventions, there were a lot of Logan's Runners. And I think that about brings us up to date. Let's see here. Oh no, Soylent Green, that came in between, the last film of Edward G. Robinson. And now for the first or fifth or 10th time, I imagine you'll all be seeing Blade Runner, based on a classic story by the late Philip K. Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? There's a new Dick film about to open around town called Total Recall. And in this film, it is not something that was built in a studio, but you could go after the show just about 3 blocks down here to 3rd and Broadway and see the Bradbury building. That has nothing to do with Ray Bradbury. There was another Bradbury in 1893 who had made his fortune in silver in Mexico and wanted the first $1 million downtown office building built in his honor. And my grandfather, George Herbert Wyman, under the influence of the great science fiction novel of the day called Looking Backward, about a man who went to sleep in 1885 and woke up in the year 2000, there is one page in that book which very clearly defines what the interior of an office building would look like in the 21st century. And my 32-year-old grandfather brought that vision to life. Without realizing it, you may have seen it in The Demon with a Glass Hand and any number of other films, but it is particularly featured, as you'll see in a few minutes, in a film about to be projected for you, Blade Runner. So enjoy. Thank you.